This conference will now be recorded.
So today let us enter into the next topic of our course, very important one, microservices. The main need of going with microservices is like divide and work. It's like what here? Divide and work. Now you can select microservices is used to break up single large monolithic system into multiple independent components. So what is this monolithic system is like? Up to now, whatever the projects we have created, what we have done, we have created only one web project and we deployed only into one server and we connected only to one database. So up to now, whatever the projects we have created, they are all monolithic. Now that same monolithic we want to break up. We have to divide that into multiple independent components. Divide and work concept only microservices. So what is this monolithic? Let us understand. In monolithic application, all functionalities are part of single program running in a single environment. Running in what? Running in a single environment. Let me elaborate this using a diagram. Monolithic application. So when you take this monolithic application, here we go with the example like shopping application. In this, we are creating the components like buyer profile, catalog management, cart management like this. And all these functionalities are part of what? Single program. All these functionalities are part of single program. And we connect only to one database. We deploy into one server and we connect only to one database. So from client, based on the request, we go to the respective component and we access the application. Now, coming to this microservice, in microservice architecture, the components are built and deployed independently. The components are built and deployed independently to integrate into a single larger system. Integrate into what? A single larger system. So finally, we have to integrate these components to make it as a larger system. Let me elaborate more using a diagram. Microservices architecture. When you go in the case of microservices, here we built the components independently, like buyer profile, where we make it as a microservice using Java technology and we deploy into Tomcat server and we connect to Oracle database. We create a catalog management, we create like a microservice using .NET technology and we deploy into IIS server and we connect to SQL server database. Then cart management, we create like a microservice using PHP technology and we deploy into WAM server and we connect to MySQL database. Now from client, based on the API, it is going to invoke the respective component. But how one component should integrate with other component? Finally, we have to integrate these components. That's the main concept of microservices. So how the integration is done between the components, right? So for that integration only, we are going to make use of Eureka server. If someone asks you how you developed microservices, we are in different ways of developing microservices. So in our case, we are going to make use of Netflix Eureka server. We are going to make use of which server? Netflix Eureka server, a Spring Cloud server here, which we call Spring Cloud server, Netflix Eureka server. So what is the use of this is Netflix Eureka server is used for building a service registry and Eureka clients which will register themselves and discover other services to call REST APIs. Let me elaborate this using a diagram. Eureka server. This is the main thing to discuss now. Eureka server. Now, let us consider we are having a microservice, student microservice. The microservice means, simple words to say, it's a Spring Boot application. Simple words. It's a Spring Boot application where we create a REST API to access this service. So we have created a student microservice, and the task of student microservice is it is going to accept the school name, and based on the school name, it should return the list of students present in that school. So what is the task of student service? To accept the school name, and based on school name, it should return the list of students present in that school. Now, let us suppose this is deployed in Tomcat server. This is deployed in Tomcat server, running in port number 1111. Let us suppose it is running in port number 1111. Now, let us go with one more microservice, school microservice. School microservice. Now, this school microservice is going to accept the school name, and it is going to invoke, school microservice is going to invoke student microservice. So school service is going to accept the school name, and it's going to invoke student service using the school name. Invokes student service. Let us suppose school microservice is deployed in Tomcat server, running in port number 2222. Now understand carefully. When school service want to invoke student service, do we need to provide these location details where it is running? Do I need to give these details to school service? Yes, right? So without knowing the location where the service is running, we cannot invoke. So we have to provide the location where the service is running, like http://localhost 8080 1111. The port number is different, right? 1111. We have to provide the location where it is running. So without knowing the location details, one service cannot invoke other service. Now, in future, let us suppose we have changed the location of student service. So we have, like example, we have changed the port number to 3333. So when we change this port number, we need to update this new port number. We have to update this new port number to school service again. So means whenever a service changes the location, we have to update to other services where it has been invoked. This is the major drawback here. So the integration. Here only two services, no issues. But in reality, we go with what? Hundreds of services. If one service changes the location, we have to update to other services where it has been invoked. This is the major drawback. The integration is the major drawback here. So up to now, whatever the REST APIs we have created using Spring Boot. So if one API want to invoke other API, or one service want to invoke other service, we have to provide the location details. Without knowing the location where it is running, one service cannot communicate to other service. If you change the location, we have to update to other services where it has been invoked. That's a major drawback here. So this integration part is the major concept of this Eureka server, right? That's the main thing of microservices. The integration between the services is only the major part of microservices. And this cool microservice you might have developed using .NET technology. This student microservice you might have developed using Java technology. And you might have deployed in MySQL server. School service you might have deployed in, you might have connected to this one, like for example, Oracle server or SQL server, like that. So completely we are developing independently. So the integration is the major part here. Then how the integration is done? Using Eureka server. So what we are going to do? We are going to configure Eureka server. Then once we configure this Eureka server, whatever the microservices we are creating, we are going to register. We will be registering this microservice into Eureka server. Register in registry. We have to register our service into registry of Eureka server. Similar way, even school service also we have to register into registry of Eureka server. Registering registry. Right? So whenever we create a new microservice, we have to register our services into Eureka. Now, when school service want to invoke student service, understand? When school service want to invoke student service, it won't invoke directly now. What it is going to do? First, it is going to connect to Eureka server. It connects to Eureka server. It connects to what? Eureka server, and it's going to look up. It's going to look up student service. What is the meaning of lookup? It will connect to Eureka server, and lookup means it is going to get the server location details, these details. So these details are present in your Eureka server. So when we invoke, these details are given to school service, the location details. Then once it gets the location details, then it can invoke. Then it can able to invoke here. Right? So what is the meaning of registering? These details are stored into Eureka server. These details are registered in Eureka server. When school service want to invoke student service, first it's going to look up for that service in Eureka server. Then once it gets the location details like port number 1111, once these location details are given to school service, using that it's going to invoke the service. So like that, our work is what? Whenever we create a new microservice, we have to register our services. We have to register our services into Eureka server. So once we register our services into Eureka server, then if one service want to invoke other service, it won't invoke directly. First of all, it is going to look up for that service into Eureka. Lookup means get the location details of that service. Then based on the location, one service is going to invoke other service. In future, if one service changes the location, we need not worry at all. If one service changes the location, we need not worry, because however, before we invoke other service, first we look up for the location details in Eureka, then we get the latest location details, then we are going to invoke it. Right? So this is the main concept of microservices, and we are going to develop this microservices using Eureka server here. Right? So if someone asks you how you developed microservices, means by using Netflix Eureka server. So only one time we have to configure this Eureka server. Then we have to register our services into Eureka only one time process. These are all only one time process. Then after that, one application can communicate to other application very easily. The integration part will become very easy when we make use of what? Eureka server. Clear this concept, all of you? Right? So what is the application we are going to develop here? First we create student service. Then once we create student service, then we'll check whether that service is running properly or not. Then after that we create school service. Then school service is going to invoke student service. Then we'll identify the drawbacks. Then once we identify the drawbacks, the integration drawbacks, then what we do, we configure Eureka server. Then after configuring Eureka server, we register our services into Eureka server. Then we are going to invoke it. That's the way we are going to work. But in reality, we come in a reverse way. First we configure Eureka server. Then we create our microservices. When we register our services into Eureka server, then we are going to look up and invoke. That's the way we work in reality. But I want to come in a reverse way so that first of all you will understand the drawback. When these two are communicating directly without Eureka server, we'll try to understand the drawbacks first. Then after that we configure Eureka server, then we register. That's the way we are going to work. Okay.